Before we jump into this episode, I'm excited to announce our brand new Alt-Doc HELOC product. That's right, the wait is over. FundLoans has a second position home equity line that uses 12 months bank statements to qualify. We can do loan amounts up to $500,000 and CLTVs up to 90%. Inquire today at fundloans.com. On this episode, I get the chance to sit down with Kevan McLaughlin. You might have heard the saying, there are only two certain things in life, death and taxes. Well, he specializes in both. He is a tax attorney and managing partner for McLaughlin Legal here in San Diego. Besides winning awards for his work, Kevan goes head-to-head with the IRS, as well as deals with civil and criminal tax litigation. We discuss topics such as what to do if a tax lien pops up on one of your loans, self-employment trends in 2019, bank statement loans versus full doc, and how to create referral relationships with tax attorneys to get those $1 million deals.
Welcome to the $1 Million Mortgage Experience Podcast. Listen in as CEO Jon Maddux of FundLoans reveals tips, secrets, and origination ideas to fill your pipeline with $1 million opportunities.
Welcome to the show. All right, Kevan, how's it going?
Good, John. How are you?
Doing great. So you are a managing partner in a law firm, and is this law firm that you started?
It is. Started it 11 years ago.
Nice. And you deal directly with the IRS. You deal with customers who are, self-employed. I'm sure you have clients that, have tax issues, just like, people, humans in America do.
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of that. Our firm is kind of broken up into two halves. We have we do tax and estate planning. So on the tax side, we have a pretty good focus on what we refer to as controversy or litigation work. So defending and representing individuals, small to mid-sized businesses, self-employed businesses of any size, but that's kind of a sweet spot.
Okay.
And then the estate planning side as well. We do trust administrations, try to avoid probate, but all the usual nuts and bolts there.
Interesting. A lot of our loans that we do are jumbo, and a lot of them have trusts. They're going to have, irrevocable, mostly revocable trusts, but occasionally you'll see an irrevocable, which we don't do. What would you say, tell me a little bit how you got your start. I know as an entrepreneur, a lot of our viewers are entrepreneurs as well. Tell us kind of how you got your start and what caused you to want to deal with the IRS and taxes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's kind of like the old thing in law, at least. You go out on your own for one of either two reasons. Either you really wanted to or you had to. And, I was kind of a combination of both. I got out of a graduate degree program earning my LLM in tax, and there just weren't a lot of jobs when I was getting out. Mm-hmm. I knew that I always wanted to go out on my own, and I was fortunate enough to meet a very good mentor who kind of was willing to act as a bit of a crutch and get me out there, and got out, hustled for clients, went door to door for the first year.
Rolled up your sleeves, got your shovel out, and just said, I'm going to do this.
I did. Yep.
And growing up, did you ever were you fascinated by numbers or anything like that? Or is it just really more that you wanted to run a business?
Quite the opposite. I wasn't kind of a numbers guy. Math was actually not a very good topic for me. Grew up around entrepreneurs. I mean, my mom was one as well, and saw that in the family. So I don't know if it runs in the blood, but I enjoy that. The controversy and the practice of law I really enjoy, and then being the business owner secondarily is a great reward.
Well, what do they say? The two things that are certain in life is death and taxes, right?
We try to cover both of those.
Yeah, estate planning, yep, and then the tax stuff. So, as a lawyer, I mean, do you litigate? You go into court? You deal with the IRS? Like you go knuckle to knuckle?
We do. We litigate quite a lot. Well, I would say that the various phases of litigation, the actual, TV style in front of a courtroom and a judge and the robes and that whole deal. We probably end up doing a trial against the IRS once a year.
Okay.
At any time, we'll maybe have a dozen to 24 matters that are pending litigation. But that's kind of the end of the spectrum of the continuation of kind of a controversy. We do lots of things that begin, with the audit, the appeal, the administrative process before you're actually in litigation.
So the IRS, I think to a lot of people, is just like this scary, dark, thing that's out there that you just, you don't want to mess with the IRS. You don't, they can take your house, they can take your, they can ruin your credit. And if as we know, they're humans too. I mean, they're also flawed, and sometimes IRS makes mistakes, and sometimes we'll get a credit report, or there'll be something where there's an issue and it's not necessarily correct, or how often do you overturn the IRS, or how often would you say that you can win in a court case like that?
Yeah, I mean, win is kind of different for every case and every client, the kind of a varying degree of what might be success. We are fortunate enough to have a pretty good track record, and we do certainly find mistakes. Blatant mistakes are not very common, but those are easy enough to remedy. But yeah, absolutely, with some pushback, you can usually get some pretty good results.
Do you ever see people go to jail these days for
Yes.
IRS stuff?
Yes.
Wow.
Fortunately, none of our clients, but we do criminal tax work as well. So when somebody is identified as a target, it's a different. That is an entirely different animal than what I referred to earlier as kind of the civil side of things.
Right.
When it's just about money.
Yeah.
When it's about incarceration and freedom, and it's a criminal matter, it's a different animal.
Interesting. So our viewers, as we talked about earlier, are mortgage brokers, and they're interested in ways to find loans and originate. We have the obvious things like buying leads online, and getting referrals from real estate agents. I'm sure you've had in your long career here, mortgage brokers come to you and say, hey, do you ever have deals where you could refer me someone, or do you ever have any kind of potential borrower that you might need my services? Will you tell us a little bit about kind of that side of your career? Have you seen any of that where you had to refer some deals out and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, we refer things and are appreciative of the referrals that come our way, and
right.
I think that is one of the keys, I think, to the success that we built up is the referrals. And so 99% of our clients that we get is referrals, word of mouth, and doing great work. That it's not the barrier, but that's the key, I think, that we look at when we're referring clients out. We have not only a fiduciary responsibility to them, but we like our clients,
right?
Most of them, and we want to make sure that they're with somebody who's going to treat them well and do the right thing. So when we do have out referrals to, and we absolutely have had them for mortgage brokers, that's we're, I wouldn't say we're careful, but it is an important decision to tell a client who we recommend.
You want to work with people that are knowledgeable, that have good product selection. Like for instance, Wells Fargo or Bank of America is not going to necessarily be a good fit because their products sometimes just can't, they can't deal with someone who has an IRS issue, or, things like that. There might be in the guides that, if they've had an IRS lien in the last year, they just can't do the loan and things like that. I mean, when we are, we'll look at, a mortgage broker will look at a credit report, or we'll look at a fraud report, and we'll see like an IRS lien, and that's the kiss of death to a deal. You're just like, my deal's dead. Oh no, what do we do? So what would you say, or what kind of advice would you give to a mortgage broker that saw an IRS lien on a property on a title report pop up? Like, what do they do? Can they call someone like you and you can help? And
Yeah, and let me remind me to return to that. But on that issue, to your first question about outbound referrals, like that has been a key issue. Our clients, just the nature of our services and the nature of our practice, kind of either one of two things. Either one, they're on the tax side, and not yet, hopefully not, but sometimes quite frequently, they are not as creditworthy because of tax issues, installment agreements, liens, whatever it might be. So they have their own reasons that they might not be able to get conventional mortgages at Wells Fargo or whomever. On the other side of it, on the estate planning side, those people are usually making decisions about the end of their life where mortgages are not, lending is not their key. They're looking at actually dissipating their assets and sending it down to the next generations. Things like, insurance and life insurance more specifically become more of an issue for them. But refinancing does come up quite frequently in the estate planning context,
right,
when buying out siblings.
Sure.
Okay, you've got a piece of property, you don't have the liquidity, but you don't want to own it with your estranged sister-in-law in Alabama. You got to pay her off, and you need to come up with the cash somewhere. So that's kind of when we certainly do see it. To your second question about, if there's something on credit reports or
title reports,
what unless you're looking at the finances and it's determined that there's a lien or something like that, or an installment agreement or a liability to the IRS, the credit report or the title is what it picks up is the liens.
Right.
That could be IRS, it could be state. I think the first thing for a broker is to figure out what it is, who it is.
Right.
And that's sometimes not as easy. Could it be sales tax? Could it be use tax? Could it be payroll taxes, income taxes? What is it? Civil penalties.
Especially for a self-employed borrower.
Especially self-employed borrower. Because, if they are using as a sole proprietor, self-employed, if they haven't incorporated or LLC or anything like that, all of that extra, payroll taxes, sales taxes, use taxes, whatever it might be, is going to hit them on their personal liability. Engaging a professional early in the process, if the borrower is coming and being clear that is an issue to encountering, I think that's obviously the first step in that relationship.
Yeah, sometimes they try to hide it. They're like, no, I've got no issues with the IRS, and then it pops up, and that's what I'm saying. Like the kiss of death. You're like, oh my gosh, this is like I was counting on this commission, and now it's gone.
Yeah, and the reality is, and why I think either one, to engage another professional early, or at least have the client bring it up early, is you have to work back that lead time, and to deal with a lien. If you're buying real estate, again, there might be something you can do to either get it on an installment agreement, assess whether the client could get the lien either withdrawn or, subordinated in some sense. Buying property is going to be a little bit more difficult, but you could get on, for example, an installment agreement, and that might be sufficient for purposes of the lender. All of that is going to require time. So if you've got a fixed date that you're going to close, and you come and it's closing on Friday and you're coming on Monday,
and you see a lien, you're like, oh,
it's not going to happen.
No.
And so the other side, I think, where there's actually more that can be done is on the selling side of it, and an opportunity for at least loan originators to add value to the kind of the whole transaction. Is if the seller has liens, that's something that's going to need to be dealt with for the buyer to get clean title. And that, is an opportunity to get discharges, subordinations, witdraws, something else, and be able to
Are those a little faster? So like
a little bit faster.
You could get on the phone and deal with it.
Yeah, I mean the IRS does recognize the sense of urgency in those matters. So typically,
plus they're going to get paid, right?
They're going to get paid. Well, not necessarily.
If there's equity.
The two on the seller side of things, the two that we encounter is typically either subordination or a discharge. So subordination, and this would be on a refi as well. So you actually might have somebody who owns and wants to refi, and it's not creditworthy. The lender in that situation is going to have concerns about being in a second position to the IRS. Yeah. So a subordination, you get a nice little certificate, a letter from them saying, okay, we will take a second position to lender ABC.
How often do they say yes to that? Like the IRS?
I'm not the best judge of that because, we're from our practice frequently. I think that only in rare occasions our clients, completely turn down those.
It's common sense, right? Like if you're trying to pull cash out to go, on vacation or do something like that's self-serving, like the IRS is going to say no. But if you're getting a better interest rate, you're reducing your debt, they're going to say yes. Like, is it common sense like that?
Absolutely, and that's I think the narrative and how you present it too. You're not taking this out to buy a boat,
right? But if you're paying for your kid's college or something, maybe
like an ordinary and necessary household expense, correct? It's still going to be encumbered. I'm going to use this and I'm going to bring my interest rate down from, 10 to 5 and the difference in my monthly payment, I'm going to free that cash up and I'm going to be able to pay you, Uncle Sam, a little bit sooner.
Gotcha.
So they do recognize that, and it's a little bit freer.
So do you have like a bat phone to the IRS? Do you have like somebody over there?
We don't have a bat phone, but we have built up relationships over the years, and first in general, practitioners have access to services that the general public don't have. We can kind of, it's not to get to the front of the line, but we kind of have an express lane where if you're by yourself, you're going to spend 4 hours on hold. We're on hold for 15 minutes. And then within the local community, we have like to think we have a pretty good relationship and reputation, And, if we don't know where to go, we have contacts that can at least guide us in the right direction.
That's cool. Yeah, I would think that, when you're dealing with the IRS, you want a professional. It's like, you're not going to go, if you have problems with your eyes or your feet, you're not going to go to just, anybody nurse down the street. You're going to go to a specialist, right? I mean, how important is it, would you say, if someone has an IRS issue, to deal with someone like you, like an attorney?
I love that, John, that analogy. It's like, and I've told many clients this, it's sometimes the Herculean issues, and it's a foregone conclusion. You actually have to have a professional, because this is the decision between you going to jail or not going to jail.
You hear these ads and they're like, let us battle the IRS for you, we're blah blah blah, and they all this, and we'll settle pennies on the dollar, right? Like this stuff. And the
ads are making reference to the offer and compromise program and grossly oversimplifying it. It's a great program. It works for lots of people, but it is not as easy as they would want you to believe in those commercials.
If you're bankrupt, you could probably get an offer and compromise.
I tell a lot of clients, at least with the state of California, the Franchise Tax Board, you have to be almost indigent to get an offer and compromise through. The IRS is a little bit more flexible, and again, there's a lot that goes into that analysis about projections of future income, age, medical issues, the statute of limitations on collections. There's a whole kind of half art, half science behind doing those. You asked a question, though, kind of when to engage a professional.
When does it make sense to get a professional?
And you kind of drew that analogy. You don't want to. I've told many clients before. You don't need me. Okay. Similarly, you don't need to go to a professional to get your oil changed in your car. You don't need to have a contractor build your house. You don't need that. But what you're paying for is kind of that expertise and the time, and you rent my brain and my skill set to do it. And if that has value to you, we're happy to jump in. And there's lots of times where we give just free
consultations.
We almost always give free consultations. And again, because you might come in and and this is not dismissive of those matters, because for everybody it's all relative. But you might come in and say that you owe the IRS $18,000, and it does not make financial sense to pay us to help you. And I will give you the laundry list of everything you need to do from step A to step Z to get yourself to where you need to be and, have a good result. But
it's more significant amounts. Like if you got, and I would say, dealing with jumbo clients that we deal with and dealing with people who are self-employed and they've got, where they're not W-2'd, so they're not taking, every month money out of their check but they're just taking, straight checks from the company. That probably happens more often than not, where, an entrepreneur will just think, well, yeah, I'll deal with this later, and I'm just going to take money from the company because it's profitable, and they see it going, and then all of a sudden, come, December, January, or next April, you're like, oh shit, I don't have enough money to pay this tax.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the number one reason for the collection side. When we do the tax and the controversy, it itself kind of is a spectrum, and all taxes is we always look about it. There's kind of the compliance base. This is what you do with your return preparer and leading up to April 15th to file the return, which we don't get involved in that. The secondary is like the reactionary and the audit phase of things. Okay, you said this was your tax and we don't agree because A, B, C, and D. I mean, I think that absolutely you need a professional, unless this is a small thing, because the opportunity for either expansion or the wrong result is great. The next is the collection side of things. Okay, there's no disagreement about what it is that you owe. It's just a function of how are you going to afford to pay it. In that area, we're again not the best judge of it, because a lot of our clients, it's a result of audits or other things, transferee liabilities, assessments, etc. But you've described the perfect formula for probably 98% of collection cases, at least with self-employed individuals. It's the failure to make a proper estimated tax payments, which I will say then becomes the number one barrier to resolving the issue. If I could have a dime for every time I've told a self-employed client, the number one thing you have to do to fix this problem in years past is start prepaying the current year.
Got it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's probably one of the most difficult things for self-employed people to do. But once they've been down the road a while and had a couple issues, then I think
easier said than done. I understand that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So with our products, we don't necessarily have to show returns. So how important is that? Like, would you say, like, is that a good thing for potential borrowers to be able to get more loans if they don't have to show, their 1040s, and they can, like, we'll just use 12 months bank statements per se instead of going after a tax return? What's the advantage, would you say? I mean, you were talking earlier about how, CPAs don't even like if you share your tax return, right, with a third party. Like,
yeah, I can see merit in not disclosing the return for, the two sides of the coin is it shows a lot more than your bank statements. Sure. But it also shows a lot more than your bank statements.
Shows you're eating at Taco Bell and In-N-Out, and
and there's a lot of information on a return that you might not. It's not relevant to creditworthiness or getting a loan, and you don't really want that. If you have 6 figures worth of medical expenses because you have some obscure disease that you're afraid about being discriminated against because of that, I mean that's there on your return, and that might not be what you want out in others to know. And you mentioned that on the preparers, absolutely yes. So we, in addition to the tax side of it, one of my subspecialties is we advise return preparers and tax professionals on their ethics and licensing issues, etc. And we at least counsel them, and most, if they didn't already get this recommendation from us, will have a provision in their engagement agreement that disclaims third-party reliance and affirmatively tells taxpayers, do not use your tax return for third-party reliance. So the CPA would be relieved to know that wasn't going in there, because the fingers, if there was something to go wrong, they don't want it to point to them. And invariably, if they use the return that the client lied to them about, they don't want to be put in a position where the tax return serves the same purpose as some type of other attest type engagement, like an audit review or etc.
Do you think someone should worry about, like, giving their bank statements to a lender versus their tax return? Like, is that going to trigger any kind of, like let's say, on a mortgage, you're reporting like your income is higher than you are on your tax return, because that's technically what's happening here. Like, when we do these mortgage programs with bank statements, we're saying, okay, they're actually making this much money, and they're putting that on a mortgage application, versus, providing their tax return to the lender, where the lender's going to look at the tax return and say, well, you got all these write-offs, these losses, and you're actually, in our calculation, you only made $5,000 a month, and say $60,000 for the year, but your bank statements are going to show that you made $200,000 for the year. So there's a big difference there, obviously. Is there any issues, do you think, with that, with potential issues in the future? Like, if someone were to come back and audit and ask for your mortgage application and stuff? We
have seen that type of situation. Yeah. We have, and it's compatible. It doesn't. Sure. I mean, if it's,
because there's not the write-offs are going to be allowed by the tax code.
And it's something different, where you might have a tax return and you wouldn't have a savvy originator who looks at this and figures out the adjusted gross income is negative $100,000. Well, they don't understand that was a an NOL carryover from 12 years ago that reduced it. So the bank statements would maybe more accurately reflect it. Right. If it gets to the point where the IRS is comparing apples to apples, the return and the loan applications or loan documents, and there is a big unexplainable disparity, it needs to be a full stop. Call a tax lawyer and
talk to you.
Yes.
Absolutely. So you see, obviously deal with a lot of self-employed people. What are your thoughts on the trends in America, in self-employment right now? You think it's going up? You think more people are becoming self-employed? And
the self-employed absolutely has. It seemed kind of a boom to it, in part, I think, because of kind of the gig economy. You're seeing the Ubers, the Lyfts.
Side hustle.
Yeah. So you're seeing, I think, an expansion of that area. As far as kind of profitability, we're kind of seeing a little bit of an uptick. People's, gross receipts and profit margins seem to be going up.
That's good.
And at least the stabling off of the interest rate hikes. The Fed seems to be kind of a boost to a lot of self-employed people. Ancillary real estate, so construction, heavy stuff as well. Big construction, not just your around the corner home builder, but large scale construction seems to be back and booming as well.
That's great. Okay, so there's some laws that have been changed on the tax write-off on a house, like on a primary residence. Talk a little bit about how that's a benefit or if it's not.
It was a big concern initially. A lot of people feared that there was going to be this limitation on mortgage interest deduction and on state and local taxes, which included your real estate taxes. There was a lot of discussion about the two coasts and how this would impact them. Yeah, it has. You've certainly seen people, and again, I couldn't point to any empirical information from our firm. I just anecdotally, you've seen people who were probably paying a little bit more this year than they were in the past. I have not seen it impact anybody's decision either to buy or sell real estate. It has not changed that at all.
It's such a delay, right? Like buying a house is super immediate. Like you get that, your wife sees the kitchen or whatever, and you're like, I want this house, and then you deal with the taxes later. You're gonna have that tax hit in a year from now or whenever it comes. But yeah, so I could see that where it wouldn't really affect you immediately. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the last thing I like to ask my guests is, as entrepreneurs, we have failures and successes. What would be your favorite failure that you've had? Because I'm sure you've had some in your career.
Yeah, I don't know, John, as we're thinking about business and stuff like that, not failing to learn the lesson earlier that you to get money up front from some clients. Yeah, and then I was always remiss. I regretted, when I was in my later part of my education. Everybody makes financial decisions, and I needed to be in a job that paid, and I couldn't continue to take unpaid internships. And I passed up a position at the Department of Justice, and I've always been kind of regretful that I never got that experience.
Interesting. Were you able to still learn some stuff from that, or would you go take a job?
Yeah. I mean, look, in hindsight now, looking at it, we've been extremely fortunate, and we're in San Diego, and none of that might have come to fruition if I'd taken that other path. So.
Absolutely. Well, any last bits of advice for a mortgage broker that's looking to potentially partner up with a person like yourself that works at, that has a law firm? Like any kind of tips on how to approach, for a referral relationship?
When I first started, I cold called and I went door to door, and you just build that network and understand the goals and the desires of the professional, and that being respectful of that relationship, I think is the key.
And maybe to bring kind of the product selection and say, hey, and educate, like an attorney, like say, hey, this is what we've got. Like, did you know that we can do these type of loans?
And John, I couldn't tell you that would be an invaluable approach to doing it, because as I said that, cold call, yes, but we get it all the time, right? And we do get inundated, and it is easy to dismiss. But if there's something unique about the product or the offering that we perceive that we can bring value to our clients, that would make all the difference in the world.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for coming on, Kevan.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you guys are looking for more content like this, we have a FundLoans YouTube channel where we give away more tips, secrets, and origination ideas. You can also email us at info@fundloans.com. And if you've made it this far, I think it's safe to say you like our content. So please subscribe, share, and send us your scenarios. Let's fund loans together.